Hey guys, welcome back to Neuroscience. We just got done talking about the nervous system, and so now we're going to jump into talking about neurons. Neurons are pretty cool little dudes. So we're going to go over their anatomy and the types of neurons before we move on to how they communicate with each other via signal transmission. All right, so let's start with the anatomy. But first, some cool facts. Neurons are the building blocks of the central nervous system, the CNS. Okay, there you have in your body about 100 billion neurons and a quadrillion synapses. That's a lot. If you were to line up all of the neurons in your body side to side, keeping in mind that they're only 10 microns wide, and for perspective, a human hair is 70 plus or minus 20 microns wide. Okay, so neurons are 10. If you were to line them all up side by side, it would be about 600 miles worth of neurons. That's a ton. A ton as in like as many stars as there are in the Milky Way, you have neurons in your body. When you are developing in utero, 250,000 neurons are being produced per minute. That seems like, well, but 9 months? How many minutes is that? How many neurons is that? Okay, you create a whole bunch of neurons as you're developing, but then you also undertake a process that is called synaptic pruning, which gets rid of some of those neurons once things start getting hooked up and connected during development. The velocity of the signal transmitted through a neuron is different. 1.2, remember our friend Helmholtz with the frog legs? Right. Well, signal transmission doesn't just vary based on how far the signal has to travel. The signal also travels at different speeds depending on what neuron it's on, right? So it can go anywhere from 1.2 miles an hour, super slow, to 250 miles an hour. Okay, these are like your reflexes, like the doctor tapping on your knee and you kick your leg out. So how did we figure out what neurons look like? Well, we can thank Golgi staining, Mr. Camillo Golgi. There he is there in his list. Kind of hard to see him there, picture quality, but there he is, looking all the Colonel from Kentucky Fried Chicken-esque. And he discovered a staining technique wherein silver nitrate turns nerve cells dark black. Very cool. Along came Santiago Ramon y Cajal. Wow, that's a name. There he is, being all pensive and stoic. He shared a Nobel Prize with Golgi. And the thing with Cajal is that, so Golgi was kind of the first to see the true structure of the neuron. But he still thought that everything was really all tangled and fused, and like there's no way you're ever going to get to, figure out how these neurons are hooked up. So Cajal came along and perfected Golgi's technique, and it's called the Cajal stain now. And what he discovered is that no, neurons aren't just like all tangled up in bunches. It's not just a mess in there. Their ends don't actually touch at all. There are gaps between these neurons. Okay? So this really starts a lot of speculation as to, okay, well, how are neurons actually communicating if they're not touching one another? How do they send signals? He also noticed that we have sensory neurons that were taking information in and motor neurons that were taking information out, right? So with this advanced staining technique, he was able to differentiate different neuron types as well. Pretty cool. So let's talk about the actual structure of the neuron now that you have a little bit of background. Neurons have a cell body, just like any other typical animal cell you learned about in middle school, right? So there is, right, like here's your typical animal cell. These are all the things that it shares. It's got a nucleus, got a cell membrane. It's even got, mitochondria, etc. Okay, so the cell body is where all the information processing takes place. If you want to think about it as like the calculator of the neuron, and we'll talk about this calculator metaphor in just a little while. All right, so the axon. The axon is all about information transmission. Every neuron has one axon. Okay, and the length varies. This is the axon of the neuron, right? Okay. This is how it's passing information. So I'm saying anyone want to take a guess as though we're standing here in class. So you might want to take a guess as to what the longest axon is in the human body. And there it is. So the sciatic nerve, right, for people that have sciatica, you have problems along the sciatic nerve, which is the longest nerve in your body. It runs from your spine all the way down to the bottom of your feet. Okay, dendrites. Dendrites are magical little things. They are these tree branch-like structures up here at the top of the neuron. I realize now that I probably could have used a little bit more updated of a picture for this neuron, but you'll see other pictures as we go. Okay, so the dendrite is all about information reception and relay. So the dendrite is taking in information from other neurons, and it is relaying that information to the cell body, and the cell body is doing air quotes with my fingers, calculations based on the input that it's getting. All right, so here are an example. This is a stained neuron, right? And here are some spiny dendrites, right? So this is the neuron. So this is the cell body. Sorry, this is the axon. Okay, it's calling them primary dendrites, right? But there's all of these little branches here. These are all taking in and receiving information from somewhere else, from some other neuron out there. Okay. Now, you might have noticed the little hot dog looking wrappings on the axon. Okay, this is called myelin. And myelin is a fatty material, and it's composed of Schwann cells, which are glial cells. Glial cells are support cells in the nervous system. And so they do things like they create architecture for neurons, like almost like a scaffolding for neurons. They bring nutrients to neurons. They do all kinds of things, right? So we've got a lot of different kinds of support cells. Very important. So the Schwann cells make up this fatty material, and it covers the axon. And essentially what it's doing is insulating the axon. Okay, so if, our friend the walrus here, he's got a whole lot of insulation. Why? Because he's got a whole lot of fat on his body. Fat will keep you warm. So it's the same kind of concept here with the axons and the myelin, or the myelin sheath, right? Sheath meaning like a covering, so it's a myelin sheath. It also provides for speeded information transmission. Okay, so how does it do that? Think about this. What's the fastest way to get a ball from one person to the other? You throw it, right? That's kind of what the myelin does. So here's what happens. Oh, no. Okay, I'll just use this one. Okay, so here's what happens. You've got a signal coming down this axon, and essentially what it does is the signal sort of jumps from this little end of the hot dog to this end of the hot dog, and these spaces are called the nodes of Ranvier, and this is essentially like throwing the transmission from here to here, from here to here, from here to here. It's just speeded up. So the signal doesn't actually have to travel the entire length of the neuron. Now, this is why information transmission in myelinated axons or myelinated neurons is so much faster than non-myelinated neurons. So, let me get back to where I was before the disaster. All right. Throw the ball. Here we are. Okay, so myelin is also what makes for the differences in color in the brain. So all this white stuff here, this is white matter. It looks fatty, right? It is fatty. So this is myelinated axons. Yeah, the gray stuff, this is unmyelinated neurons. Okay, so you've got a lot of what am I trying to think of here? I lost my words. It will come to me. Okay, so essentially, sorry, gray matter and white matter. Really, it shouldn't have been that difficult for me. So the white, we call it white matter and gray matter because that's exactly what it is. And the white matter refers to the fat on the axons, right? Okay, so, or the myelin on the axons. It is also what helps provide these kind of contrast differences when we take images, when we use neuroimaging. So the myelinated axons are going to have sort of a different density. They're going to have they will have more diffusion along those axons, right? So these different types of tissue, different types of material will show up differently when we use the kinds of neuroimaging that we talked about before. All right. Myelin is really important. Myelin sort of keeps the signal from just going haywire and you losing the signal, not keeping it contained along the axon, moving down the axon and out the axon terminals, which we'll get to those. So when demyelination happens, you get things like multiple sclerosis. And multiple sclerosis is a product of demyelination. It's a loss of sensitivity. You get tingling, pins and needles, numbness, you get pain, you get muscle spasms, difficulty moving. There's acute chronic pain. You also get difficulties with speech, swallowing, coordination and balance, bowel and bladder, right? Nerve conduction is super duper important, and when you mess with it, all kinds of things happen. So let me just give you a little bit of an example here.
That face that is usually covered by her phone has finally made an appearance.
This month, many countries around the world will be spreading awareness on multiple sclerosis, or MS, a disease that affects millions of people worldwide. But what exactly is multiple sclerosis? MS primarily affects the central nervous system, which consists of the brain, spinal cord, and optic nerve. Just about everything you do depends on this system functioning properly, from breathing to moving and even watching YouTube videos. And these actions are all facilitated by neurons throughout your body, cells which we've talked about many times in our previous videos. These neurons are able to send signals all throughout the body at incredible speeds, in part because of the fatty coating that surrounds them, something called myelin or the myelin sheath. This myelin insulates the impulses and allows the nerve signals to reach their destination. However, in the case of MS, this is where the issues occur. The immune system is designed to fight off disease from viruses, bacteria, parasites, or other agents, and does so by distinguishing these things from healthy tissue. But in the case of MS, the immune system ends up attacking the myelin in what is classified as an autoimmune disorder. This process of demyelination can lead to a buildup of scar tissue, hence the word sclerosis. The CNS then becomes unable to send and receive signals properly. Messages traveling along the neurons may be slowed down, distorted, or stopped altogether. Because of the varying locations and nature of demyelination, the symptoms of MS are incredibly diverse. They can range from muscle weakness to decreased coordination, fatigue, vision problems, numbness, or even paralysis, though an MRI scan of the brain to look for lesions or scarring is integral to diagnosis. For some, the symptoms come as acute episodes, while others experience more chronic and permanent symptoms which worsen over time. At this point, no true cause or cure is known. While potential links to environmental factors, viral infections, and genetics have been found, studies are ongoing and not yet conclusive. And while there has been a lot of work towards not only alleviating some of the symptoms but slowing their progression, sadly, these treatments do not work for all MS sufferers. Ultimately, bringing light to this issue in an effort to support and fund research is an incredibly important step to erasing MS. And though many of us will never truly understand the challenges of living with MS, we can work together to raise awareness. We would be so grateful if you could take a moment and pass this video on to your family and friends and join in the effort to end MS. This episode of ASAP Science is supported by 23andMe. 23andMe is a DNA analysis service.
We'll get back there eventually. There we are. Okay, so it's pretty disturbing disease, right? And it affects people differently. Let's have a little look at what Jack Osborne says about living with
Wow, that did
MS.
that really flawlessly. It has that natural.
Jack Osborne speaking out about his new battle with MS in an appearance on his mother's talk show, revealing the alarming signs of the disease years before the diagnosis and his plans for the future. ABC's Bianca Rodriguez, our weekend anchor, is here, and he's so incredibly optimistic.
He is, and it's a very trying time for the family, Robin. As a teenager, we watched Jack Osborne battle with drug and alcohol dependency on his family's hit reality show, The Osbournes. Now a sober and more mature Jack has returned to television to address his most challenging battle yet. Jack Osborne was greeted by a standing ovation Wednesday while joining his mother on the talk.
You guys are acting like I have MS or something.
The 26-year-old revealed he's been having MS symptoms for a few years, but didn't know it.
I had problems with my bladder, problem with my stomach, and then about 2 years ago, my legs went numb for like 2 months. And
could you walk when they went
I could
numb?
walk, but they were just numb and tingly, and then they were very sensitive to hot and cold water.
But 2 weeks after the April birth of his daughter, he went blind in his right eye. After spending 3 days in the hospital going through a battery of tests, including a spinal tap, doctors confirmed a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis on May 10th.
MS is an unpredictable illness, but nowadays we have developed so many new treatments that this is an incredibly optimistic time for people with MS.
Jack has vowed to stay positive, but in a new interview with People magazine, Sharon confesses to first blaming herself. The first thing Ozzy and I asked ourselves was, what did we do wrong? Was it something I did when I was pregnant?
We don't really know the exact cause of multiple sclerosis, but she in no way is responsible.
And with an impending wedding and new baby girl he can't stop tweeting about, Jack says his life is far from over.
It's been good, though, because I haven't been able to, sit around and, gloat on, oh, I got MS, because I've, got to change diapers and stop a baby from crying.
And there is some good news to report. Jack has regained about 80% vision in his right eye, and he says that he's taking a middle-of-the-road approach to treatment with a combination of alternative and prescription medicine. Doctors say that MS is a treatable disease, but one that will always require some form of regimental care.
And you got to stay positive.
Yeah,
He's
you
got
do.
a lot back.
You do.
All right, Fiona, thanks.
All right. So, good to see that it's something that you can actually cope with unless you have a very severe progression of the disease. It's something that you can learn to live with and to treat effectively most of the time, right? Oh, things are still happening.
I've often put myself in extreme situations for the sheer thrill of it.
All right. I told you guys my lectures would be interesting. Okay. So next, in the neural structure is the synapse. The synapse is where all of the magic happens, and magic being communication, right? So the synapse is where neurons communicate with one another, and what takes place here is pretty much as important as the neurons themselves. Okay, so here's our cell body. Here's the axon. Synapse. Okay, so the spaces between, we can't see the spaces here, but when you zoom in, you can see that space. That space right there between the dendrite of one neuron and the terminal buttons of another neuron, that is the synapse. I just said that. Right, so this is where information transfer is going to happen. And information transfer happens in a couple of different ways, and we will talk about this in another lecture in this series. So that pretty much covers it for neuron structure, just basic neuron structure. You'll see more of these things and hear more of these terms as we move along. So I will see you in the next episode, which I believe we're talking about different types of neurons. Okay, so I'll see you there.